their time away from their classrooms and their valuable time. And so we will just hold off on items 3 through 8 until after the math textbooks discussion.
That's all right.
Okay, Dr.
So,
Mackey or Dr. Boyd?
I will turn it to Dr. Boyd. So he is in charge of this. We do have some members of the math textbook committee
And thank you for
on
joining
here.
us.
And I'll let you, Dr. Boyd, just let you take off.
Very good. So we have our PowerPoint that Mr. Creel will pull up in a second. And we'll get started. At the point again, I'd like to echo what was just said. Our teachers are truly awesome. They have done an exceptional job of working through this particular process. So kudos to them and all their hard work. Next slide, Mr. Creel. So I just want to share with you the steps in the textbook adoption process. Of course, we've completed almost all except the last step here. So the first one was revision of the math course of study. That was done. Publish an invitation to bid. Of course, that's done. Appointment of the state textbook committee. Done. Textbooks reviewed. Done by the committee. Public input solicited. Done. And our last step is a recommendation to the state board. Initially, we were going to make a recommendation at this particular board meeting, but we decided that we need to do a little bit more work, and we're going to share that with you today. So Ms. Crew, if you go to the next slide, I'm going to share information about the publishing companies who completed a bid package for the math textbooks. So we have 16 different companies here. Our committee members went and worked and looked at all their materials and are already evaluated using 2 performance standards. So the current, next slide please. The current math textbook review form has several different things on it. There were several mathematics textbook review forms that were viewed prior to selecting a particular process. It was determined that the previous mathematics scoring tool was a strong instrument that captured valuable information, which is what the committee used initially. So in order to meet the needs of the 2020 mathematics textbook review process, the previous 2 revised reflected on 2 main categories. The main category was the math courses of study. Of course, the course of study contains the content standards, and the content standards is the information that we have as teachers or educators have to convey to the students. And the second component is the student mathematical practice standards, which is associated with an A. We also have additional criteria regarding the content that was used to determine whether or not the textbooks would be a good fit for schools across our state. Next slide, Mr. Creel. So in order to truly understand the process, it's always good to do a comparison. So the current document that we have used has alignment to the mathematics course of study, alignment to the NAEP, and again, comments for certain books. So what we would like to do is we would like to revise the document and have, of course, the first 3 items there, but with the 3rd item, instead of comments for certain books, we want to have comments for every single book. Also, we want to be able to distinguish whether the material, the math material, is a standalone material or if it's supplemental material. And the next category we want to add to this is the rigor and usability of written material. And then the last category will be the coherence and usability of visual material. So you may ask, why are we moving in this particular direction? Well, I've said this to the group, and I'll say it again. The group that has done this work are the best and the brightest in Alabama. There's no doubt about their dedication is second to none. But in some districts, there may not be individuals who have that good understanding of mathematical practices, the courses of studying how all these different things work. So in order for us to allow our LEAs to make informed decisions, instead of just using the 2 scores that we originally planned to use, which is alignment to the Alabama course of study and alignment to the NAEP, we want to add a few other categories to include supplemental information. Is this a standalone book? Or is this a sole source book, which is a big difference because sometimes you have standalone books which are really small, but they don't cover the whole content. So it would be really good for an LEA to understand that, hey, this book looks really good, but it won't serve my purpose because it's only a supplemental resource. Also, the rigor and usability of written material. just because it's aligned to the NAEP or it's aligned to the course of study doesn't necessarily mean that it has the rigor that's needed, or the fact that it's used.
Pardon me, Doctor. You cannot hear on WebEx.
Okay.
It's muffled at best.
She said it was muffled at best on WebEx.
WebEx.
Thank you.
Maybe try speaking up, seeing.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Open.
Ms. Bell, is this better?
There's a 30-second delay.
Yes, I can hear you, Dr. Richardson.
Okay.
But I think she's on live streaming, right?
Right.
Yeah. And from what I understand, it's better on live streaming than usually.
I can hear you too, but I don't know.
Okay. I'll speak a little louder.
I mean, I don't know if that's.
There's the microphone right there, see up in the ceiling.
Sure.
Ms. Bell, be sure to let us know if it becomes clearer, please.
Well, I thank you. I listen, the audio part on live streaming because it is better, but WebEx is not. It's, as I said, muffled at times, and you can hear a little bit at other times, but it's just not ideal.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, I'm a little closer to the mic, Ms. Bell. This may help. So in this particular slide, we're looking at a comparison of what our current rubric or scoring guide has as compared to where we plan to go with this. And the revised document still will have the alignment, the textbook alignment to the Alabama course of study. Also, we will have alignment to the NAEP standards, comments, not for certain books, but for all books, and supplemental information. When I say supplemental information, I mean whether or not this resource is will be used as a supplemental resource or whether it's a standalone sole source document. And also the rigor and usability of written material. Very important for a school district to know this. And also because COVID and we're living in a digital age, many of our schools are using digital material. That being said, it's going to be important to have a score regarding the coherence and the usability of the digital information. So having all of this information will give an LEA a considerable amount of information about whether this is a good resource or not so good resource. So, and as I stated before, this is really important for the resources because many of them, some of them may not have the time, the energy, or the personnel to be able to look at the list of textbooks in a way that they can discern what's good quality and what's not good quality. So once we have this, we'll be able to report 4 different scores to the LEAs and comments, which will help them drive the direction. So the comments is qualitative information that may say this is an excellent resource, however, blank, blank, blank. Or this book does not cover fractions as well as it should. Some of those types of comments which will help our LEAs tremendously. So using all of that, we could then categorize the textbook or the resources in 3 different categories. We hadn't decided on the names yet, but we may have the top tier, a first tier, second tier, and third tier. Meaning the top tier will be the books that have scored the highest scores, or had the highest scores, and then the middle tier and then the lower tiers, and with the lower tiers meaning that those are weak resources. And the districts at that point can make an informed decision on what is best for the students in that particular area. So this is a comparison there, but the individuals who deal with this on a daily basis and have taken the time and the energy to go through all of these books are online at this particular point. Ms. Becky Boykin has done an exceptional job leading the committee, and I'll turn it over to her and allow her to introduce her team members. Ms. Boykin?
Hello, how are you guys doing?
Doing well.
Thank you for having us on here and for allowing us to be a part of this process today. Online with me, I have Marissa Benjamin, Bianca Gaither, Lee Twig, and Bonnie Jakes. And I think they're each going to tell you a little bit about our situations that we are in currently, that have to do with the move forward of the textbook adoption. And I'll go ahead and speak first, and I'll move to Bianca Gaither from Jefferson County School System to be able to speak next. First of all, I do want to thank you guys for making this to be such an important decision in our state. I applaud all of you for putting this process in high regard, and I appreciate you letting and allowing us to be a part of this as teachers in this state. At this point, right now, many of the districts in our state have started an adoption process, and the teachers that are on this panel today with me are going to discuss the various problems they've encountered so far regarding the adoption process. I'll speak specifically for middle schools. As you know, the new curriculum is different for 7th grade, and we have 2 new courses of 7th grade advanced and 8th grade advanced. The availability of workshops that were available online for all of the teachers in Alabama consisted of having about 1 workshop that had a max of 37 openings for teachers for the entire state. Therefore, I think that having the materials in those hands of our teachers at all grade levels, and I'll speak to specifically middle school, is imperative to be able to effectively train those teachers in the courses of study for the 7th grade advanced and the 8th grade advanced classes. So the quicker that we can get our materials into the teachers at our local LEAs, I think the better it will be for implementation this fall. Bianca, I'll turn over to you to speak about what Jefferson County is going through at this time.
Good afternoon. I just want to echo what Becky said. Thank you for having us and giving us this platform to speak. So I am at Jefferson County Schools, which is, as you know, the 2nd largest district in our state. And because we are so large, our process does take quite a bit of time. We have 32 teachers, and my textbook committee consists of 32 representatives from those schools, along with one of our board members, parents, our EM person, and our ex-ed. And so the process is quite lengthy because we do listen to presentations from all of the publishers that we have listed, and also our facilitators take that back to their schools. And they have meetings to give updates on all of the textbooks that we have, and they review those, and every grade level does a rubric per school, so that we can kind of look at the quality of the lessons. They have a rubric that they do have to fill out for us, and then from that process, we actually disaggregate the data, and we choose our top 3, and then it goes back to the schools, and they rank the order of what they like from the least to greatest. So it's a very hands-on process. We make sure that they look for that rigorous content that matches the standards. But with it being 32 people on the committee, it does take quite a bit of time. And for us, the urgency is we're still using a very outdated textbook series that has actually come out with new editions. And so our teachers right now, if they're just using the textbooks, then they are not meeting our standards right now, and they're using outdated materials. So it is very vital to us that we can get quality materials in the hands of our teachers.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Marissa Tate. Becky and I have known each other for a long time, and so she introduced me as Marissa Benjamin, which was my maiden name, so don't be confused by that. My name is Marissa Tate, and I'm a math coach in Hoover City Schools. I'm a building-based math coach. But I represent Hoover City Schools on the committee, and I would like to echo exactly what Bianca said, that we are, while not as large as Jefferson County is, we are actually feeling the burden. The teachers in my building are feeling the burden of not having a curriculum because of some leadership decisions made in our district in 2010. We adopted early, and so we are using a program that's 10 years old. Therefore, the math coaches have had to put together a curriculum for the teachers. And while I like to think I am well versed in what's going on. I'm not a curriculum writer, and so our teachers are really hungry for the ability to have a curriculum that's, of course, standards based, but that is reliable and would help them have the ability to get good math instruction to our students. So again, just we're in the same boat. We'd like to be able to start the process and listen to the presentations at a district level. Of course, I've heard them from the state level, but the people in our district, teachers and leaders, would like to get the process started. So we're looking forward to moving in that direction.
Hello, I'm Lee Twig with Calhoun County Schools, and thank you for the opportunity to speak with you today. I'm going to echo what Bianca and Marissa said. Really need this process to get going at our local level so that we can get these materials in the hands of teachers. It's a long process for us at a local level because we have to go through a very similar process that we've gone through at the state level. And really rate these textbooks and what's going to meet the needs for our students. And also, one thing we haven't discussed is the amount of professional learning that has to take place when we do get a new curriculum. So anything that we can do to get this process rolling so that we can move forward in our own districts would be so helpful. None of these products are a perfect program tied up in a bow. And so we really need time to align to our standards which of these textbooks are really meeting the needs of our standards, or are we going to have to look elsewhere? And so I just urge you to move this on so that we can move ahead in our own districts. And thank you for your time.
Ms. Jakes? Ms. Barkin?
What?
You know Bonnie's,
Yes.
in there. Yeah, she was in there earlier.
Are you able to hear me now?
Well, you're in the well.
So take it away.
There she goes.
Okay, how about that?
Oh, perfect.
Good.
So sorry, I tested my audio and my video, and then I kept trying to jump in, and nobody could hear me. So I'm so sorry. I'm on my cell phone at this point. I just wanted to echo what Bianca had said. I am the only member of the five of us from high school level, and there have been some major changes in the course of study at the high school level, including, courses going in different orders and just a spectacularly different set of standards for several of our courses. And it's vitally important that we can get these resources into the hands of our teachers as soon as possible, particularly for those courses that have substantially changed, particularly for courses that are brand spanking new. I know there was some concern about the lack of rejection of any of our textbook materials that we reviewed, and I wanted to speak to that from the high school level, that one of the new courses actually didn't have any materials submitted at all, and then the other only had 2 textbooks, and both of them lacked about 50% of the standards being covered. However, the textbook committee felt strongly at the high school level not to reject those books because that's going to put your LEAs in the position of having to build those courses from the ground up. So rather than, starting with half of the materials to be able to pull from, starting with 0 of the materials to be able to pull from. And we just honestly felt like it would be better that the LEAs had something, even if you categorized it as a supplemental resource, had something from which to pull to get started, because those are brand new courses with a whole new set of standards. Our training as far as this past year was also very limited because of just the virtual caps and things like that. And we have started implementing the pieces of the new course of study that we were able to implement this year, but just like the other ladies have stated, I mean, the last time that we adopted, I was pregnant with my daughter, and now she's 8. So it's been a minute, and we're using outdoor dated resources and doing the best we can, but honestly, we really need new materials.
Thank you. So here's,
Are there any questions that we are able to answer at this time, or are we going to go on with the timeline?
let's go with the timeline first, Ms. Boykin, and then we'll take the questions. So on the slide here, the screen rather, we have the timeline here. Mid-November, we'll make modifications that were discussed a few slides ago. In late November, our committee will reconvene. In December, the committee finalizes the proposed recommendations. And in January, the recommendations will be presented to the board with the hopes that the board would approve the recommendations made by the committee. In February, the State Department sent out communication regarding this textbook adoption. This will go out to all the LEAs. And in April of 2021, the LEA completed the local adoption process and began the purchasing of the materials, so they will have it ready during the summer so they can start the school year with all their math textbooks in place. Any questions at this time?
So, let me say two things on what Dr. Boyd, on top of what he said. First, let me start by saying I appreciate very much that he's really jumped into this process and met with these ladies over and over, and to help us, make sure we fully understand where we are. And certainly these ladies and all the others on the textbook committee, you've just done a masterful job. And we're all trying to understand, every person I've talked to, including the board members and other people in the field, they just want to make sure we get the very best materials for our students. So we all understand that. The timeline, Dr. Boyd and I had some discussion on the timeline this week, and so that's why I want to draw attention to this, because this is on me. They kind of laid out a process that would take us to February to do a vote, and then immediately turn around and get something to the districts. My big concern with that, as I expressed to Dr. Boyd, but I think this is worth talking about, is that again, we will have 2 new board members that won't have had the benefit of all these discussions coming in February. And so, plus, my second item was, just trying to, as quickly as we can, get it to the districts. Now, there is a little bit of jeopardy that you need to know about, I think. So, if the textbook committee comes back and they do this much more extensive list that you'll see then, not just the rankings, but this other information, then that would come to you, as he says here, in December. If the list is the same and it's just more extensive in information, but it's the same books, then that's fine. If we publish a new list, so if we get to the point where we say we're actually going to change the list and remove some books, we can't add because we can't do the bid process, then what the law says that the list that the board's considering has to be published for 30 days. Now, we published the whole big list, but there is some concern among the legal folks that if we were to change the list and take some books off, that we have to publish that new list for 30 days, which means that we might end up having to have a call board meeting in late January, because you have to have 30 days. I have to look and see, but I don't think there are technically 30 days between the December work session and the January meeting. I could look back and make sure, but I did check that once, and it seems like there's not. So we might either have to have a call meeting or just push it to February. Then the only problem with February, I just want everybody to think about that up front. We'd be making sure our 2 new board members either feel comfortable because they've not been in the discussion, or they might say, hey, we'll just sit this out. Again, as I said earlier, there's a chance these people can come in, these 2 new ladies, in their very first meeting have a couple of really big items on the table. Now, I've talked to both of them. They are I mean, they are committed, they're excited about service, and so I think they would even come in and do the homework to be caught up. It's not about that, it's just, you know, being a part of the process. But anyway, those are two things I just want to throw out there for us to talk about. And then the questions, these ladies have, they have the answers. If y'all got questions for them about the process, about the books, about the scoring, any of that. And I don't know, Charles, is there a way now that we can make them the whole screen since we finished with the slides? Are we, Dr. Boyd? Is there
We
another
are,
slide?
yes, we are through with the slides.
Okay.
And Dr. Rank, there's actually a little more than 30 days between December and January board meetings.
Okay, good. So we would make that 30-day
Yes, sir.
window. That's great.
And did Jeff and Dr.
Thank you for looking at that.
Did Wayne and
I don't know.
I can appreciate the report from everyone, and it sounds wonderful that we have a committee very qualified. I'm concerned that so many people are questioning the textbooks committee, and hearing you today, you don't sound as certain as I thought the textbook committee would sound about the resources that you have available to you, the books that you're studying. So maybe I'm expecting something ahead of time. But it just from hearing you and hearing the constituents in the community question the choice of books that are on the list. I mean, I'm getting calls from everywhere. And to a point that I decided something is wrong. Somebody is motivating this group of people. Why are they just calling all the time? But hearing you today, it sounds like you too are not certain, or that you don't feel strongly about the books that you are recommending. Am I hearing you right?
Ms. Boykin, did you hear the question?
I believe that, for my own sake, I feel very confident about the list of choices that we have for middle school and for elementary, and Bonnie can speak to the high school. As far as my district, I already know that the textbooks that I would like to see move forward and placed on our consideration list. I know we have all looked through every single textbook that's on this list. We know what we like about it. We know what we don't like about it. We are able to speak to where the textbook is strong, where the textbook is weak, where we do have concerns about the standards, and where we may need to have extra ongoing training for those teachers for certain standards that were changed that appear in a different manner in the textbook. However, saying that, I know that with the textbook options that we were given for my top 5, I feel very confidently in how they address our standards.
Yes, that's my feeling as well. I think that the concerns that we had are not about the items that we reviewed, they're about the items that we are currently using that we adopted in the last round of textbook adoptions. What we are saying is that those items are inadequate for this new course of study, and we desperately need to be able to go ahead with these new textbook adoptions so that we can have materials that have been evaluated according to these new guidelines that we are to be following. We have had some great books submitted. Those 2 new courses that I spoke of, that finite and then the math modeling, those courses are a very different kind of collection of material, of standards, and LEAs are going to have to work some on those courses, but going back to the drawing board at the high school level, it is not going to make a substantial difference in terms of what you see as a result of our ratings coming out, because most of the materials that we reviewed performed very well for the course of study standards and for the math practice standards. So I think our concern is that
we want to be permitted to move forward with this as quickly as possible so that we can have these materials that we are very excited about available to the local education associations.
May I ask a question?
Yes, sure.
I think is it Dr. Stewart that just asked that last comment? What is it that you're hearing people say about the list? I'm just curious what their comments are.
What comes to mind is, can you hear me?
Yes.
What comes to mind is that there is a standard that requires that these books in math, for example, require all the children to learn at the same pace. That they have to be on the same timeline. And I just know as an educator that that's not reasonable, but that was one of the concerns. But here, with your introductions and looking at the material, you are qualified, and I was resting on that, but when I heard your comments today, I think that's something that led me to hear you say that you're not certain about this material, but I must have heard it wrong, because I think it was Ms. Twigg when she was speaking, that I picked that up, and then I started hearing it from others. But if you're saying what Ms. Jackie just said, then I heard it wrong, because I was confident in reading the material and looking at your meeting that we have a sound committee, and we have a committee to do the work and the research and to vet it out. Then I was satisfied. I couldn't understand why people were calling. I kept going back till I almost know you all, because I kept going back to your information. But then when I heard you there, I don't know whether my mind was clouded with what I've been hearing. I thought I heard something different, but I'm so relieved to know that you're saying, let's move forward with where we are.
Yeah, so I am like I said, I'm a building-based math coach, but I'm also a national trainer for OGAP that was mentioned earlier with the AMSTI program. And one of the things that I tell people across the nation when I train their teachers is that a textbook is only as good as the teacher who's teaching it. And so one thing that from a perspective of a district perspective, but also from a trainer perspective, is that teachers are going to have the training to use these materials, whatever materials they choose. And when they have the training to use the materials, they can then make the choice from a lesson about whether or not this is good for all, if this lesson might be catered to a certain small group, or if I need to scaffold this lesson for specific students in the classroom. So I think as far as textbook goes, the list that we have, I think I would echo what Becky said, that and Ms. Bonnie Jakes, that we probably we should move forward. We have a good list of materials for LEAs to choose from. But I do think in our state, I'm just gonna get on my soapbox for a second, but I do think in our state, our teachers need training in mathematics and how to educate students in mathematics, and I think we're on a good path with that, as I heard from the AMSTI group, but I would hate for people to think that a math program one program written by a publisher or by a few people is going to cover educating a whole classroom without adding or subtracting anything. They're going to have to make decisions based on formative assessment. They're going to have to make decisions based on the students who sit in front of them, whether that's behind a computer or in-person instruction. I just feel really strongly that if that is what people are worried about in your district, I feel very comfortable saying that the programs that we have to offer are good programs, and the teachers are going to have to be trained in those programs in order to be able to be a good user of the program.
Mrs. Ziegler, I have a question I'd like to ask.
Go ahead, Ms. Bell.
Yes, there has been mention of changes since the last textbook adoption and the need to adopt these textbooks because of those changes, if they could be, more, if they could describe those changes and the need because of those changes, I would like to know specifically, what they're referring to. I understand some changes in the, of course, high school level, but as far as the overall changes and the need to adopt the new textbooks because of those changes, I would appreciate more explanation.
Sure.
Ladies?
Looks like Bianca has a.
Okay, I can start. So the current textbooks that we're using now, we got when there was a huge shift in the way mathematics was taught. And at that time, there was really only one textbook series that was looking at this conceptual to abstract approach. And so I think a lot of us adopted that textbook because it was the only option out there. And so as more publishers have moved along with us in this shift, in this change of thinking and going from conceptual to abstract, there's been more options put out there. We've also increased the rigor in our teaching in the classrooms. And so the textbooks have started to change and kind of come along with us in this change of best practices in teaching. And so we literally have adopted something that was right when we were on the edge of moving to these best practices and how to teach. And so those materials are outdated and they don't have the rigor that we need. They also don't address our new course of study. They address our old standards. And so we do need to kind of make a shift so that we can match what we're saying. This is what we want you to accomplish in your grade level. Here's the resource to be able to do that. So that's kind of what the biggest changes have been. It's just moving to best practices and making sure that we're covering the standards in each grade level that the state has put into place.
I think at the high school level as well, the rigor has been increased with this new adoption of these standards. And when I say that standards are different and that they've kind of moved around, when we evaluated, say, an Algebra 1 textbook prior to this study, that was based on standards that were intended to come prior to geometry. Well, now geometry comes prior to algebra, and so standards in algebra have changed based on the order of courses and to increase the rigor and that kind of thing. I mean, at Limestone County, we adopted 2 different textbooks, one for a standard Algebra 1 and one for an advanced Algebra 1. Well, that's not really applicable now based on the new course of study. And so it just amounts to the fact that although, math is math, the way that we've gone about teaching it has undergone a substantial change. The order that we're teaching the standards, the order that we're teaching the courses, and we just haven't evaluated our current resources based on those new requirements. And so the books that we have now, we don't know fully if they even have all of the material in them that we are being required to teach in each of these courses, because we just haven't evaluated. Teachers are having to do that as they go at this point, which is a little bit dangerous. So,
also with, because the previous textbook adoption was for my district 10 years ago, when I was still a classroom teacher, the consumable resources have run out. So what's happening in our district is, yes, there were changes, but also we don't have the consumables anymore. So, and the contract has run out with Pearson, who we bought, and so we don't even have their online program anymore that we can print the resources. So our teachers are either having to go to an old resource and make copies. And I work in Hoover City Schools. I'm not talking about one of the more rural districts. I'm talking about a pretty suburban district where we're having to make copies, we're having to pull resources and put together best practice lessons because, again, it's a more than 10-year-old resource that was adopted as we were getting the college and career ready standards of I believe it was 2010. So, I mean, some of what was given to us as, in order to align to the Alabama course of study at that time was inserts for these books. So, I mean, it's just, that's what happens over time is these publishers keep writing resources. There are resources that will come out next year that will be better than the resources we have currently. So, I mean, resources change and old resources become old resources, just like any textbook would get old, and is the validity of the problems, the things that are happening. I mean, we want those to be relevant problems for kids in today's society and what's happening. So those are all the kinds of changes that we're talking about as we discuss changes, but also the urgency of needing to get this list out to districts. Ms. Bell, I hope that answers your question.
And can I pick it? Okay, I'm sorry.
Dr. Richardson, were you asking a question or?
Mike Reynolds was.
Oh, I'm sorry, Dr. Reynolds?
It seems that the focus is now on do we adopt the new textbook or in comparing to the old list. My concern is the quality of the list that we've been presented. I see the evaluation of the textbook, and someone, I think your board made a comment about most of the people, most of the list are appropriate. I'm not interested in most. I'm interested in a comprehensive function where we present books that we're willing to spend Alabama textbook money, and we're willing to put in children's hands, whether it's Limestone or Madison or anything else in my district age that are quality. My concern is some of the textbooks that were forwarded for us for adoption were not rated very, very well. I would like to, I served on a previous curriculum committee and textbook committee, and our foundation was to present books that we felt nobody would be presented a book to adopt that wasn't high quality. And if the textbook committee is going to not do that, I will support the recommendation of the textbook committee. I want the textbook committee to come up with just the highest quality books and only those to put in the hands of our students and our teachers and our curriculum people.
Dr. Boyd, I have a question.
Yes.
Go ahead.
I realize what the committee has said. In the past, we looked at the alignment of the course of study and alignment to the NAEP. But in order to make sure that we are getting the best of textbooks, you all are now looking at two more categories. I heard several of the committee members talk about the rigor and usability, and then the coherence and usability, because now we have many school districts that are using virtual platforms or Chromebooks. But I guess the question is, of all the books you have on the list, is it correct to say that all of them are rated one way or the other?
Repeat the last part of the question.
Is that correct to say, Dr. Boyd, or anyone on the committee? I know there were a lot of books on the list, but as committee members, were you given the task of having to evaluate all of the books? Because what I heard the board say is that you all were going to look maybe at tier 1, which would be the highest, tier 2, which would be the middle, and then tier 3, which would be the lowest. So I guess my question is in line with what Dr. Reynolds was saying, that he wanted just the top books. My question is, was it not you all's task to rate all of the books? I'm just trying to understand the process.
Yes, that is correct, Dr. Richardson.
Okay, so your task was to rate all of the books that were on the list, correct?
Correct.
Okay, so by going back, looking at tier 1, which would be the highest, tier 2, the middle, and tier 3, the lowest, that would get us to that point, correct?
It would be. So a school district would want to select something from tier 1, possibly tier 2, and probably none from tier 3. That is correct.
All right, okay, thank you.
Mr. Boyd, can I speak to that for just a second?
Sure.
I think that there's a danger in that at the high school level because of that budget enforced. Most of our resources, in fact, I think all of them are going to score continue to score at the tier 2 level. Those finite books, you know, I full disclosure will tell you that half of standards for finite are missing from those books. However, given that they are the only 2 books that were submitted, I'm really hesitant to pull those off. Change them to a supplemental resource if you like. But what we're trying to do, to my understanding right now, is to make this LEA proof, you know, to try and give enough information to the LEAs that even if they really don't do their due diligence on these textbook committees, on these local textbook committees, they're still going to pick a resource that is excellent. And I get that, I really do. However, if you go too far down that path and you eliminate those 2 books, you are now suggesting that LEAs that may not do their due diligence on textbooks now have that course from the ground up with nothing to go on, and every district in the state is going to have to reinvent the wheel to do that. So my hesitation on that is that when you remove those 2 books because they scored low, you're not leaving any other options for teachers of that course. So you have to be really about making that generalization across the board.
Right, but Ms. Jakes, the book wouldn't be removed off the list, it would be just classified in a different tier. And what you just said could be stated in the comments category, so that would help. The scoring guide, or the scores that we get for each category, there are 4 different categories, is quantitative value. But for the districts to really have a good understanding, it's going to take qualitative information. So what you just eloquently said, put in words and comments, will offer a considerable amount of insight to the districts, so they know that with finite math, even though this is not the greatest textbook in the world, it's the only choice I have, so I'm going to use this book.
For sure. My concern was just that Dr. Reynolds had indicated that sources to be of the utmost quality, and that's a little ambiguous.
I don't want the level 3 books to be approved and anybody to spend money on it. Let me be very clear about what I mean about quality.
This is Jeff Newman, may I speak?
Go ahead, Mr. Newman.
You know, I understand Wayne's point on this and being a local superintendent. You know, because I always, you know, when we get a book list that's already been adopted by the state Board of Education, recommended by the superintendent, and gone through the vetting process, it's kind of an assumption that when you get that list, they've been vetted and they cover everything you need to at the local level. I mean, you know, that's what I've always thought. You know, and I see Wayne's point on that. You know, because if you think about it, and if you get that list down at the local levels, you're thinking that they've been vetted and they cover that course of study and the standards and every one of those, so they wouldn't send it down to you. But I see Wayne's point in that, or either that needs to be communicated very well to adopt from the upper level tier. Because it's not, you know, and this has nothing to do with the committee, and I appreciate everything they've done and everything at the State Department level and all. But when it comes from the State Department to those local levels, there's kind of an assumption there that it's already been vetted. It's you know, you adopt a book and you get 2/3 into the year and you see your teachers start realizing, well, these standards are not being covered in this. I mean, you know, and you can say that's a local vetting thing, but on the other hand, I think it should be identified before it comes to the local level that not all standards are covered in this particular textbook, or some kind of identification before it gets there.
And let me ask what I want to say, Jeff. When somebody mentions it depends on how effective the LEA does in vetting the textbooks, as a local superintendent, and my expectation is the textbook committee at the state level and the state board of education and the state superintendent do the vetting for us. And if you're going to say that it's the responsibility of the LEA to do the vetting, then what's the function and what is the role and the responsibility of the state textbook committee and the state board of education?
Right, I understand. That's kind of what I'm saying too, Wayne.
We're saying the same thing, yeah.
I understand that, yeah.
So,
I agree. This is Stephanie Bell. I agree with the comments that have been made by Mr. Newman and Dr. Reynolds. for all the reasons they've already stated. I am concerned, especially if it's been mentioned, as has been mentioned, that you have textbooks that teachers, especially newer teachers, rely on, and they're already deficient in teaching subject matter, and as mentioned, and I just think that we need to be very careful, and we're looking at a big climb in terms of all of the NAEP assessments and other measures used to compare states. That's not the reason for looking at the quality, and but certainly is a good reason. But I do appreciate, as has been stated, the work of the committee, and I do understand that you can only approve what is submitted to you. I would think that there are better texts that just were not submitted, unfortunately.
So I have a question then to the three of you that have asked these great questions. Do you have a recommendation, or what do you think should be done as a result of your thoughts? Are you suggesting that we should go back to the drawing board and hear from more textbook companies, or are you, what do you think?
That's not a decision for any one of us to make. That's a decision for the state school board. So when you direct the question, and I'm not trying to be combative in any way, but the question should be asked of the State Board of Education as a whole, not certainly of just three of us. And that's a discussion that we would have to have separately.
Okay, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to point at the three of you, I just meant you guys seem to have, it seems like maybe you had a suggestion, like maybe you had something else that you were hoping would happen, so I was just wondering if there was
I understand your point, and I think, and it's well taken, but certainly we don't make those decisions based on just three board members or four even. It's a discussion item, and it's a serious one, because as you've already pointed out, you have been dealing with textbooks that were placed in the classroom 10 years ago, 9 to 10 years ago. And so for that reason, we need to be extra careful, or very careful always, actually, in making these decisions as a board. That's something that we will have to decide. You have certainly done an excellent job in trying to work with what you were presented. But that's the task of the board, and that's certainly not a decision that can be made by just one or two or three board members. And I appreciate your question, and that's a good one. It's a good question.
Sure, I didn't think I was asking for a decision, I just was wondering if there was a proposal at all for something else, so I didn't need to say it anymore.
Let me turn that around. I think you made the comment that it would be dependent on the effectiveness of the LEA textbook committee. What do you think the responsibility of you and the state textbook committee is to eliminate books that are not appropriate in our curriculum and high quality standards? What's your responsibility before you pass it on to the LEA?
So I didn't make that comment about the LEA being the responsible party, though I do feel that way, that the LEA should do their research. I do feel like we have a committee and we follow a very similar path as the state. I also believe, because of where we are in math education, that every district in our state, and I'm talking about school districts, not the 8 districts, but every school district, city schools, county schools, operate differently, and the way that they, their philosophy of how math is taught is different because of the resources that they have in their district. And so a curriculum that works in my school district may not work in another school district, because we have math coaches in every building in my school district. And we have PD often in my school district given by the math coaches. So the curriculum that works in my school district may not work in a district right next door to me who doesn't have the funds or doesn't have the leadership, math education leadership in their district. So I do believe that the decision, the finite decision, has to come down to the LEA. My job as a state committee member was to make a list that had good resources that were aligned to the standards and aligned to the math practice standards, which we did.
Good or excellent? There's the terminology. Here's the qualitative analysis. I'm in transition. When you
Sure.
say good, my expectation is good is not having, when you talk about your curriculum, we have a state adopted curriculum, not a Hoover City system.
That's right.
Or Washington County or Madison City.
That's right.
State adopted curriculum.
That's right.
And we don't need good textbooks. We need excellent textbooks.
Well, I would go back to this, that no textbook is written to be completely comprehensive. You can ask publishers that question. They're going to tell you no textbook is written to be completely comprehensive. And what makes the textbook excellent is the teacher who's using the textbook to teach the students in front of her. So it's the formative assessments that are done, and it's the constant cycle of instruction that happens in the classroom that makes the textbook excellent, and that is kindergarten through 12th grade.
And so
So I would,
I'm
go
sorry.
ahead, give it.
To piggyback on what Ms. Tate is saying, so there's a difference even across the line with Hoover and Jefferson County. So we don't have math coaches in our district. There are 2 specialists, me and my partner, and we're servicing 32 schools. And so our focus is really talking to the textbook company saying, what kind of PD are you providing? How long are you providing this PD? Because the 2 of us trying to do 32 schools, it is real fresh thinking. And so it's not necessarily even just the content as much as it is, we might not have to have as much PD from the textbook company as we do, because we have less people to train our teachers. We're also asking, are we going to get this professional development throughout the adoption? Because when our new teachers come in, we've got to get them trained and ready. Because our partner and I, we really focus on our schools that are lower performing. We have new teachers in every school.
She froze. Uh-oh.
This is Jeff Newman. May I make a comment?
Yes, sir, go ahead. And someone explained to Miss Bianca that she
Yeah.
froze out.
Yeah. My point in this is I'm a local superintendent sitting down here, and I get a textbook list that's been vetted by the committee, adopted by the State Board of Education, and there's books on there that may just cover 3/4 of the course of study of the standards in that book. I just don't understand why we put the weak ones on there. You know, regardless of professional development and everything else. You know, I mean, I've been in education 40 years, for level of teaching and everything else, so I understand this process. But I didn't realize, or I didn't really know, or I don't know why, that we actually put the weak ones on the list, unless you have to somehow by law. And if we do that, we should communicate that to the local system, that this book does not cover all the standards in our course of study, or this book does something else. You know, that's nothing to do with the committee or anything else. I'm just saying that communication to the local LEAs, they really need to understand that when that list comes to them, don't take it for granted, because we're sending stuff down there that may not be good textbooks for.
Well, I think that's what Dr. Boyd needed with the addition of the information on the from the committee that we had proposed to do, that in the case of the full level, the only books that we are talking about passing along to LEAs that are not what we consider upper tier are those final. And the only reason that we would do that is because there aren't any other books. Those are the only 2.
Yeah.
And we would rather
I
have.
understand, but some of those books still are meet our standards better than others. You know, how you rank them, you know, by tier. I'm not talking about those 2 that the new courses like that, but I totally understand what you're saying about that. That could be to the side. You know, this course, this is the only thing we have available, and it covers about half of the content standards, whatever. But I'm talking about the rest of the list, the whole rest of the list, you know. Because, you know, I'm from a rural system, but there is no, we got principals turning lunchrooms right now, they're not even substitutes. So the least we can do is offer the best textbooks we can get, because like you say, it may be 8 years before you get another one.
Well, and at the high school level, I don't think we have any others other than those two that are in that lower tier that we're, all the other resources rated very well. And again, I think very clear communication, I agree with you absolutely, we need to know that these have been passed along because they were the only two books submitted, and we are aware that you have to supplement. But as far as, you know, your point about why would we do that otherwise, at the high school level, I don't believe that we are.
All right, well, thank you very much, and thank you, Mr. Newman. Dr. Davis would like to add a comment, please.
I just want to share, I think, some of the bigger picture of where we have discussed those high-quality instructional materials at the state level. And so what we looked at, and I've looked at with these ladies, is those additional criteria that we would look at. And when you look at, I just looked at Curate, which is in Massachusetts, Louisiana's. When you look at what they've laid out, and there's one other state, I'm sorry, that's what we would like to do with the rubric, the two rubrics, that it's not a, you pick based on not just strong, weak, moderate, not a number, but if it does this. For example, rigor. When you look at rigor, that is using that academic vocabulary, and if the book that or the instructional material that I'm ranking, if I look at it and it is defined plus, minus, then that is weak on the rubric that I have put together, that these ladies have looked at, and you can check. But it takes those two, take the other states and what they're doing, so that if I have something like Louisiana is the one that, while it has that tier 3, it also tells you why. So it might be that 25% of the standards are the only ones that, it only covers that. So that information becomes what you look at as part of this process. What it also has done, from what the other states tell us, is then those publishers rise to what you expect. So we put those two other areas that go beyond the standards and the mathematical practices that they've already done, but it's very specific as to what I'm looking for that says, well, does this book have the rigor that is expected? So it's not just, yes, I think it does, or there's more. So I wanted to just clarify that would be the process that they would use for these other areas. So we're not changing what they've already done, but extending.
Well, and I want to say, I think we need to make sure that we hold our publishers responsible. We don't need any watered-down curriculum, because they're writing, say, to Texas and adopt statewide, and they say, well, we'll just tweak a few things and Alabama will accept it. I want them to start looking at us like, whoa, when we go to Alabama, they're going to hold our feet to the fire. We better make sure it gets at least 98 to 100% of their course of studies, or we just won't go to Alabama. We just cannot anymore accept things that our kids do not deserve. And I am feeling very strongly that we don't need watered-down curriculum. We don't need to be accepting things that are not the best, because we keep finding out what's happening, and our kids scoring low is not acceptable anymore. My soapbox.
Now, can I say a few
You go right ahead.
You can't. I'll jump on that soapbox. Okay, I sympathize with the time pressures, and that when the ones that have used textbooks for over 10 years, that's too long. And I hate that. I'm hoping AmSty could supplement, could help you out in this time. Schoology, we've got that going. Hopefully that we can supplement and help you with this. Innovation, yes, for finite math, if there were only 2 submitted and they were both weak, then perhaps we could look at the college level. They offer finite math in college. I took it. Can we not? Like you say, you could only evaluate what was submitted. You had no control over that. So I'm not blaming the committee. I think y'all did an incredibly strong job. So thank you so much. But we know they offer it in college. Why did we not look at that? Why didn't the publishing companies do that? Can we go back to them? I don't know these answers, but I'm just asking, maybe we can be innovative, and at worst case, maybe we could supplement, write our own. Minnesota, right? They write their own math curriculum. Yes, it would be horribly long, tedious, expensive work to do. But in cases where we get low quality submissions for a class, that's hard for me to take. I don't want our children to suffer from that. And so maybe we do have to do something not at the local level, but at the state level. That's what we're here for. Okay, to supplement some of what some of the others have said, most of mine, when I started asking them questions, said that when they get a list, and Jeff, I think you referred to this, that when they get a list from the State Department, approved by the state board of textbooks, they assume that everyone on there is high quality. They assume they're starting from high quality. One of my systems said that their teachers, sometimes not even in the subject matter, that usually 4 to 5 teachers are asked to serve on a textbook committee. They're doing 2 afternoons of PD, and they have to decide on textbooks for their school. But they assume that the list that they're giving, any one they choose is going to be high quality. So I'm not a math expert. I'm not an education expert. So what do? I go to my school systems, and I ask all 21 systems in my district, what do you need from us? How can we best serve you? Number one, absolutely, was alignment with our courses of study, with ACAP, with the ACT. They said, do not send us any books that are not aligned. They actually wanted, Dr. Boyd will have a stroke over this, they wanted each lesson in the textbook associated with a specific standard, and if there were not the standard covered, they wanted us to submit a lesson that was covering the standard. They want detailed rubric ratings, not just a few scores, but detailed rubric ratings and scores, separate lists for comprehensive and supplemental. All weak text should be rejected. Only, like you said, if they were the only ones submitted, okay. But they're not happy with it, but they got that. Some schools wanted only the top 5 ranked for every grade. You guys would understand this much more than me. They said DOK. I had to say, what is DOK? What is it? Depth of knowledge? They want very high depth of knowledge. They said most textbooks now that they are using do not have adequate depth of knowledge. But the ACAP and the ACT asked these rigorous questions. Their current texts don't have them. So they said they wanted that rated on a rubric. What is the level? How many of the questions do that? They wanted parent-friendly. At least something that was parent-friendly in these texts. You know, can parents understand? One school said they wanted dashboards that were distinct for schools, parents, student, class. They asked about the assessments. What type of assessments do they have? Formative. They want to know what tech features are free. They said be careful with these publishing companies because a lot of times they'll have all these add-ons that are very expensive. They want to know what's free. They want support for EL, dyscalculia. Didn't know what that was, but they want dyscalculia, special needs provisions listed. They want research-based homework problems, not just busy work. They want a digital component that will generate individual learning plans for individual students. I don't know if Schoology does that, but that's what they want from their math. They want an emphasis on math discourse. The best practices, they appreciated that you took that seriously. But emphasis on math discourse and strong core, strong tier 1, tier 2, tier 3 with off-level support and high-level DOK. And so I know I'm mentioning a lot of things, but this is what the school systems, at least in my area, this is what they said, these were the items that are important to them. And I felt like it was perhaps instructive for y'all to know. So when you present your rubric, they don't want just 2 scores. They want all this information listed, and they also, I was not aware of this, they said that the in-service centers have already contacted them, that the publishing companies have set dates to come in January and do their dog and pony shows about all the math textbooks. The school system said they want these rubrics before they go into those in-service center dog and pony shows. They want to have this information so they know better which questions to ask of the publishers. So I feel like it's up to us, if we're going to stick to that January date, we need to provide that information to these school systems so they go in with their questions. They go in prepared and researched. So I'll hush now, I'll get off my soapbox.
Absolutely, you made some really good point, and your point goes to the fact that each district is unique. It has indigenous and unique characteristics, so one district wants almost a particular thing, another district wants another thing. And the depth of knowledge, well, we fixed this because we've added a scoring rubric on that goes with the rigor and usability. And we also added a part of the component that we heard from others talking about everything is going digital now, so there needs to be a category for doing the digital, plus the category with the comments. A lot of those things that you mentioned, you may have mentioned 6 or 7 things. If we were to do that, we would have a rubric with 10 different columns, which would almost be impossible for a committee to do that.
But the comments.
That's right, which is why the committee agreed that we'd have a comment section, we'd have comments for each individual textbook, trying to touch up on the highs or the lows of the textbooks, so that the district can make a more informed decision.
And I can send you, I summarized like
Absolutely, absolutely.
what they said.
So I think
Ms. West?
I've waited patiently and listened because I wanted to take it all in. I just have one question regarding the additional depth of our rubric. It seems to me that over and over again we've discussed professional development. Is the data there for each textbook on if that company offers PD, how much, is there an additional cost? That seems to me that that might help the locals select between one book or another book if they felt that they were going to have that additional opportunity for professional development. And that's my only question.
typically it's in the best interest of the textbook company to provide as much professional development as a district requests, because if they don't, then they're deemed as having not so good service and it would not be considered in the future. As a former textbook coordinator of a school district, anytime we requested professional development, we received it. But the point was made early on, and it's so true, the textbook is only as good as the end user or the capability of a teacher to implement the textbook to fidelity. So that being said, it is truly important for us to do that.
Dr. Warren, I would add also, let's not focus always on the responsibility of the teacher. Sometimes the teacher's ability to adjust and adapt is only as good as the product, the textbook we provide. It goes both ways. As a former superintendent, I can tell you, when you deal with a wide range of textbooks in the area, even Bonnie will look at the difference in Elmont and Blackstone County and other schools. You have a variety of teachers. You have to provide a quality textbook if you want to have an expected outcome with the parent involved and the student involved. You can't just pass along and say, well, it depends on the individual teacher and what your kid gets. I think our role right now is adopting quality textbooks. I'm not satisfied that we're eliminating and we're determining what is the best quality textbooks we want to spend Alabama State textbook money on.
So what we'll do is
say it depends on the teacher. That's not adequate to me. That's not in our decision-making office.
As a group, what we'll do is we'll regroup, textbook committee, myself, Sean Stevens, and Dr. Townsend, and we'll have a discussion, and we'll report to the board via email or some type of way of what we come up with.
Are there any other board questions? Okay, thank you, and ladies, thank you so much. The whole point of bringing us together is discussion and to ask questions and to get your input, but we do want you to know that we value the hard work and dedication that it took into this. But we also want you to know we're fighting for what's best for all the kids in the state of Alabama, and we appreciate all of your hard work. Thank you. Okay. Next, and if y'all need to leave us, we understand, and thank you kindly, not board members. Let's move on to item 3, which is discussion of the Alabama State Board of Education meeting and work session dates.
Go ahead.
I'm sorry.
All right.
The only thing I wanted you always know that our July is always, of course, on a Tuesday. But please go down to November, where we have to move the date because it would fall normally on Veterans Day. So we would have to go from the Thursday to the Wednesday. I just wanted to point that out to y'all. I'm sorry. Oh, I'm sorry. Was that all I needed?
That's all. That's the only thing. So the board next month, we bring this to y'all to approve. If you see any questions, let us know. But otherwise, that's what we would propose.
Okay, so that was item 3. Item 4, we're going on to the announcement concerning the intent to adopt new Alabama administrative code. Dr. Mackey, I think we have.
It's a long section. It's not as detailed as it looks like it would be. Dr. Boyd actually has this presentation. He may, if he's tired of talking, I will. I think I can do it, but Dr. Boyd, I'll turn it to you if you want to go through this. This has to do with, obviously, teaching standards, but it's also closely tied to what we're doing with new teacher evaluation system.
Absolutely. So, Mr. Creel is going to bring the slide up, and we'll go ahead and get started with an advance. Mr. Creel. So, just want to briefly discuss the history, as Dr. Mackey said, is related to our new teacher observation tool, the tool that we're creating now. And I'd like to share with you our projected timeline. So, brief history. The Alabama Board of Education adopted the Alabama Quality Teaching Standards. This is part of the Governor's Task Force on Quality Teaching Standards. This was done as part of the Teacher Education chapter in our administrative code. And that was back in 2007. In 2009, the board also adopted a resolution to replace PEPI. PEPI was replaced with Educate Alabama. And this was an observation tool aligned to those particular standards, the one, the AQTS. In 2015, the Board of Education replaced AQTS with the Alabama Core Teaching Standards in the Educator Preparation chapter of the Administrative Code. So we have it in the preparation chapter of the administrative code, but we don't have it in the professional development section there. So we're not changing any of the standards. All we want to do is add it to that particular location. So we'll go to the next slide, in which what we're trying to do today is propose to you that we add the new Alabama Core, not new, but Alabama Core Teaching Standards. This would be adopted and be a component of 290-4-3.03. It serves as a companion of the 290-3-3.03. They're basically the same thing. One is in the teacher preparation section. The other one is related to teacher professional development and teacher evaluation. And the reason why that is so important, this fall we'll be using a new tool. This new tool will be our observation tool that will replace the Educate Alabama system here. Will be able to capture information to meet the guidelines associated with ESSA. Next slide, Mr. Creel. In order for us to do this, this is a proposed timeline. Today I'm making the recommendation to you guys on December the 10th. We'll announce the intent to adopt the core teaching standards. And on February the 11th, we'll actually adopt the core teaching standards. And because of the way the Code of Alabama reads in terms of getting something passed, it will not go into effect until April the 13th, 2021. Again, no new standards, exact same thing, we just place it in the location that it needs to be placed in so we can have our new evaluation tool in place, our observation tool in place. Any questions?
And that'll be next month?
Next month.
Yes.
We will announce the intent to adopt next month, and then you would not vote on the final adoption until February 4th.
And then after the April date, when would the tool be applied to our teachers?
Good question. August of 2021.
August of 2021.
Absolutely, yes. And we're actually in the pilot phase of the new tool, so we're testing it now, the tool, to make sure that it's valid and reliable.
Will you provide to the board a brief executive summary of how the pilot goes?
Absolutely.
That would be good to have.
Yes.
Prior to making this decision.
Yes.
This is Dr. Richardson.
Yes,
Has
ma'am.
it been determined when the other administrators will be trained on the new instrument?
No, ma'am, not at this particular point.
But they will be trained?
Yes, they'll be trained on it, yes. The instruments will only be used for, I misunderstood you, the instrument will only be used for the teachers. The administrators will not use that tool, they'll continue to use Lead Alabama. But yes, they will be trained, absolutely.
No, I mean, the administrators who will be evaluating the teachers will be trained on the instrument, that's what I meant.
Yes, absolutely, yes.
Okay, and thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Boyd. Before we go on to item 5, 6, 7, 8, which I think we could sort of blend together, Dr. Mackey, did you want to make a correction about something?
Yes, I sure do. And so you're right, 5, 6, 7, and 8, if you just look at those are pretty, 5, 6, and 7. I think.
I'm sorry.
Pretty close. 8 is a recognition for Computer Science Week in December. I went back, Mrs. Bell asked a question, and she was right. So earlier, we were going through the course of study. I actually was in the wrong place in my head. What I was giving you was the definition for the textbook committee, not the course of study committee. Two separate committees do two separate things. So the course of study committee, and Jason was kind enough, he went and pulled this for me at lunch, but there are 28 members of the course of study committee. It is set up a little different because the course of study committee comes through the board. So there's, I won't go into all of it, but there's an elementary teacher from each of the 7 congressional districts, and then there are secondary teachers from each of the congressional districts, but we use current congressional districts, whatever the current congressional district is, for the course of study. For the textbook committees, we use the congressional districts from the 1990 census, but for course of study, we do not. So it is a little bit confusing, and I said it the wrong way before. And then we have members at large, 3 members from education, higher institutions of higher education, and then 7 that are appointed by the governor. Also, for courses of study, those local educator positions, the 14, 1 elementary and 1 high school, have to be recommended by their local superintendent also. So they go through a recommendation process before they come to the board. And we do still have, again, task force members that just fill in if there's a place missing. But that's the 28 members that go through it. And I think, I'm not sure, I don't want to speak too far out, but I'm not sure the course of study members actually have to be confirmed by they do. They have to be confirmed by the Senate too. So the governor's appointees shall have expertise in the area, and they have to be confirmed by the Senate the same as the textbook committee members do. So it is a little bit confusing, but the main difference, and she was making the point, she was absolutely right, is that with courses of study, they come from the current congressional districts. With textbook committee, they come from the congressional districts as set in 1998. And of course, we're all keeping our fingers crossed that when the census is done, but when the counting's all concluded, that we still have 7 congressional districts. And if not, we'll have to see what the legislature wants to do about about that, how it might be adjusted. And also I have for the ones of you who are here, the evaluation, my evaluation. So Mr. Moore, he's gone already, but he put all these together, had a discussion with the governor the day before yesterday, and told her we would give these to you today. And what we'll do, I can email it also, the electronic version, but we will also mail this to the board members that are not with us today. We're going to mail you the big spreadsheet. You'll see it's on a double-sized sheet of paper. And what we will do then in December, y'all will do an official vote on a evaluation. But you see here the numbers. You'll have to go back. What we're going to do also, I'll send you the questions again if you've lost your set of questions. But you'll have to take the question and then you can look at it and see where each one is with the question. And then I will also come back and I know we're changing instruments next year, but I'm going to also come back and do a little summary with some of these areas for some personal and professional growth areas for next year based on these scores. But I'm also going to tie it to more of the new one too, since we'll be using something different next year. So you'll see that. That'll be coming out. And the other thing is to let you know we've gone through, Dr. Boyd helped me with this too, we went through the questions that we used to ask about superintendent and principal evaluations from HEPI, and now have gotten that down to 20-something-ish, and we'll share those with the board and with the committee and let you go through them then. And well, I mean, we reword them a little bit so it doesn't say the principal does this, but basically as an instrument that we would use for legislative leadership, for associations, and for business people to get their input in things. And I think you'll be real pleased. I started to do that today, but I was a little worried about confusing next year's instrument with this year's. And so I thought it'd be better to go ahead and get this done, and then I'll just send that to you before December. It does not, because that's not, I mean, you've adopted an evaluation instrument, and that's just a data collection mechanism. So it really doesn't require, like an official vote of the board, but at the same time, we want to make sure everybody felt good about it, because if people say, no, it's not what we want, that we would fix that. And my thinking is that we would want to send that out next year around the 1st of October, maybe even September if you want, to think about, because you want to get it back and have time then to look at that data before you fill out the instrument, I think. But you'll have it. I'll just go ahead and get it to you, certainly before the December meeting, and you can look that over. But again, I've tried to get it down to 20 questions. It's not quite to 20 yet, so it might be a little more. And then you might want to whittle it down some more and say, no, that's too much to ask of these, people. But there's simple statements, and basically also a 1 through 5 rubric where they can, and some of them won't know some of that information. Yes, Dr. Reynolds.
You're going to email us the tabulation that you got from
yes, sir.
the governor's office?
Yes, sir.
Who are safe at home and not taking our lives at stake and your COVID.
Yes, sir. I'm going to email it to you and send you a hard copy. I will do both.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Dr. Mackey, are we preparing, or are you preparing a packet of information like with this information for our 2 new board members so that they understand the instrument next year, since it is very different, and sort of where we finish this year? Do you think that would be helpful?
I think that's very helpful. We have a date set, the first Monday in December. The 2 of them are coming in, and we're going to do a new member orientation with them, and we will add that. In fact, we were working this morning on our agenda, so we'll add that as part of that. That's a very good idea.
I know when I was new, I had no idea what the instrument was going to look like. So it might be helpful to give them a few months to digest
Yes,
all
ma'am.
that.
And we also, since you brought it up, we also were, one of the things we discussed this morning was getting with you and Dr. Stewart and say, now, what are the things you wish we had gone over in your orientation?
That's a good idea.
So if you'll be thinking about that over the next week, we would like to know that as we put the agenda together.
And you can't ask for a year's
I
experience.
have a lot to add.
Okay, Dr. Stewart, I'm serious, we need to know about how we can best help them. And,
No, you all have been wonderful. Now, is December my last meeting?
no, ma'am, be January. You'll serve through the January meeting.
You can't leave so fast.
Not
Sorry.
quite that
Good
quick.
try, good try. Uh-oh, she just left us. So did we deal with these issues? We're good to go?
I think so, unless y'all have any questions on those. We had, we'll have 3 ed prep programs, I think. Sanford and Troy and USA. You want to look at those quickly and see if there's any, of course, you guys questions between now and then.
No, we're good. We just hope.
Dr. Mackey, the
Yes, ma'am.
Sanford and Troy are 2 of the institutions. Remember, there were 7 institutions that were questioned. Only 4 of them had programs that are impacted by the Alabama Literacy Act. You've already cleared UAH. Sanford and Troy are 2 more of the 4. And Faulkner hopefully will be ready soon, so that will
Okay.
take care of that.
So that's what this is doing, it's clearing that up.
Good, yes.
And then South Alabama's new programs.
Good, okay.
Thank
Sounds good. All right, on that note, have a safe trip going home. Thank you for all coming with us, and good evening. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Let me ask you this. So, I've talked to these 2 ladies.
I don't know, I'm trying to their names, maybe, I mean, I feel like they turn on me, and I don't feel like they should be like, oh, I don't know, but you know, it's definitely a line of organizations, and that's, you know.
Okay.
Everybody but me and Jessica, because I was out